Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 14th meeting of the Genealogy Society of Flagler County. I'm Ann Staley, a director of the Florida State Genealogical Society, and I'm happy that we at FSGS can make it possible for you to have this virtual meeting. Before the meeting begins, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. You have a control panel. It usually appears on the right-hand side of your screen. In the box, there is at the top an arrow in an orange box. That's your toggle switch to open and close that panel. The third item down, if you click on it, you'll get to view the webinar in full screen mode if that's what you like to do. After you open the control panel, the handout for today's presentation is in the section of the control panel labeled Handouts. You might need to click on the little triangle next to the word to access the link to download it. There's also an item labeled Questions. The presenter is going to be taking questions at the end of the presentation. If you have any questions, just type them into that questions box on your control panel. You can type them in at any time, and then I'll relay them to the speaker at the end of the presentation. If you have any technical problems, that means audio or video, they're often solved by just leaving it and then coming back in with that same join link in your email. Now I'll turn it over to Bill to conduct your meeting.
Okay, thank you, Ann, and welcome everyone to our October virtual meeting. Hopefully everybody's been able to stay safe and well since our last meeting. Let me just mention a couple of items. One is October is Family History Month, and we have again as a society put up a display at the library. That display is there, and we encourage everyone to go and take a look at it. It's an excellent job has been done by Rick Birdie and his entire committee. Very informative, very professional. I really encourage everyone to go and take a look at it. One of the nice things is that the library is sparsely populated, so it's easy to do some social distancing when you take a look at that display. Next item. Belk's Charity Days was last weekend. I thank everybody who participated, and a big thanks goes out to our treasurer, George Miller, for taking on that effort and making it possible that we can actually partake in it. Another thing that's coming up is the Festival of Trees at the library, which we take part in every year. This year we'll be putting up our family Christmas tree on Monday, November 16th at 10 a.m. in the morning. If we had our normal October meeting with everybody present, we would be showing some examples of some of the decorations that we put on the tree and encouraging our members to make those decorations to add for their family. Being we're not in person, I encourage you to go and take a look at the tree. It'll be up from November 16th right into January. And if you'd like to add a decoration to depict something for your family, please do so. Next thing is, I know everyone has read the newsletter. I'm absolutely positive of it. So you'll all know what I'm about to say is that if you are a member who has paid in 2020, your dues are now good through the entire year of 2021. It's something that the board voted to do, and something that we could do because of our treasury was in good shape, and something that we thought we should be doing for our membership. So if you know anyone that may like to join, now's the time, because if they join in 2021, their dues are good right through if they join in 2020, their dues are good right through 2021. I'll also mention that our November meeting will again be a virtual meeting, and it'll be back on our normal third Wednesday schedule. I'll say more about that at the end of our meeting tonight. And then our December meeting will be on December 2nd, which is a first Wednesday. Well, why December 2nd? It's the day that was scheduled at the library because that's the day we could get the meeting room Instead of changing things that people have been notified about already, we decided to keep it on December 2nd. And it's going to be a virtual holiday meeting, one that I think you'll enjoy and we'll have a lot of fun doing. With that, let's get on to tonight's meeting. Let me introduce Dawn to you. Matter of fact, most of us know her. Leslie's a former member and maybe a future member of our society. Leslie, I just want to remind you, if you join this year, your dues are good all through next year. There's some incentive to rejoin. And she's been working on her genealogy for close to 60 years. She's used the traditional methods, films, visits to repositories and cemeteries. She's recorded discoveries on paper group sheets, on paper pedigree charts. And then with the advent of computers, she bought her first version of Ancestral Quest in 1997 and has been using that program with all the updates to record her findings and to create reports. It took a year of non-research to transfer her old charts into digital format on Ancestral Quest. And then with the advent of the internet and RootsWeb and message boards and genealogy sites and then family searches, internet presence in 1999, and that she joined Ancestry in the year 2000, her research time and success has increased exponentially. Her main database has increased fivefold. So tonight's presentation that Leslie's going to give involves a case study that will show how using DNA, which is a brand new field for Leslie, coupled with searching genealogy websites, social media, and official county records, has resulted in a wonderful discovery of a new family for her husband. With that, I'll turn the meeting over to Leslie.
Thanks, Bill. Thanks for inviting me back into the fold. I hope maybe I might do that. That's a good idea. I'm going to go to my presentation right now. Let's get that going. Did everybody see that?
Yes, it can be seen.
Okay. All right. Okay, as Bill stated, I'm working on a DNA case that happens to mention my own husband. This home right here is the house where my husband lived in, and from the time he was born until he was about 4 years old. This picture was taken in 1986 when we went back up to visit, about 43 years after he was born. It was purchased in 1920 by John's grandfather. His two children inherited this little house on a dirt road in the woods of Maine. John was born December 1943 to Wilmer and Florence as their second child in Rumford, Maine. The family lived on a rural neighborhood road called Burgess Hill. His older sister was born in August of 1940. And when John was born on Burgess Hill Road, it was just a dirt road with about 7 houses on it. And there was a little dirt branch road that was no wider than one vehicle that had a few more houses. So the whole neighborhood had maybe 12, 13 homes on it in 1943. But John never felt like he belonged to that family. His parents divorced when he was 4 and his sister was 7. His father got custody of the kids. Both of his parents later remarried, and his mother gave him a new half-sister when he was 7 years old. John's playmates were his paternal cousins who lived near the family. And you can see John is the one in the front. That's his sister right behind him. And those 2 other kids are his cousins on his father's side. And this is his same little boy that you saw in this last picture there, the other little boy. And this is him there with John. John is with his paternal family at a family reunion that we had a few years ago. You can see that John is about 6'2" and his cousin is 5'4". And despite the fact that they both have little tummies and they both have the same kind of shirts, they really don't resemble each other at all. This picture here is John with our son. And this picture was taken in 1973. and you can see that he's with his father, and you can see that the features just don't match. Not only is the height different, but the shape of the face, the color of the eyes, the other things. There's no one in his family looks like John. So it just didn't fit. He never felt like he fit in. He always felt different from the rest of the family that he grew up in. And he felt like a goose that was thrown in among the ducks. He had told me this story that he didn't think that his father was his own father before we even married. And I just kind of poo-pooed it because I felt that he looked like his mother's brother and other relatives on his mother's side, and that must have been the DNA and he inherited. But then we came up with inter-DNA testing. That came along, and after been going on for a few years, I decided to order a kit for him, and we did. And this was about, maybe 4 or 5 years ago that we ordered the DNA kit that he took. And we came back with his ethnicity estimate shows that he is 64% Eastern European. Now, ethnicity is something that is a guesstimate. It's an intelligent guess based on the other people who've taken the tests. Their algorithms that Ancestry has are different than the ones that MyHeritage has and the different other companies. So your ethnicity estimates from one company to another will vary. DNA does not know anything about ethnicity. They're just taking this and matching your ethnicity with other people who share DNA with you and seeing where you come up with. So this is subject to change, and in fact, this has changed over the years. I had researched over all of these years that I've been researching. I researched John's father, Wilmer, and his ancestry goes back to U.S. colonial roots in England and Ireland. There's nobody that came into the United States after 1740 on Wilmer's side of the family. In about 1740, in addition to some Irish, there was some German, but there certainly wasn't any Eastern European, predominantly Irish and English. So I looked back at the 1940 census that we've all seen, 1940 censuses, if we've done very much research, and we see that this is Burgess Hill, where John grew up. And right here is his mother, Wilmer, and Florence, and his father, Wilmer. And in the same household, although it doesn't look like it here, but I know that from family legend, is that Raymond right there is is Florence's brother, and he lived in the house too. And there's some people there from Lithuania on that street, on that little tiny street, people from Lithuania. So I'm thinking Eastern European, Lithuanian, that fits. So then we go to the next page of this thing, and we see at the very top is Florence's sister-in-law, who's living in the household. It's carryover from this previous page. And then we see there's still Burgess Hill, and there's some Lithuanians on the second page, which is still Burgess Hill. So we have at least 2 families on Burgess Hill with Lithuanian connections. And remember, there's only about a dozen homes on that street. So I started to learn about DNA, didn't know very much about it. Jim Lannon was a guest presenter at the Genealogy Society in 2017. From him, I learned that we need to match with others who've taken DNA tests. I didn't understand about matching, and he talked about centimorgans and how the more centimorgans you share with someone, the closer your relationship is. He talked about GEDmatch, which is a company that for free, you can load your raw DNA up there. And so if somebody has tested at another site, you might be able to match using GEDmatch. He advises to join a Facebook group called DNA Detectives, which was started and is run by C.C. Moore. So that's the first thing I did when I got home, was join that DNA Detective group. That group, this is their, from their Facebook page. This is their rules. That page is a closed group with over 100,000 people in that group, but it is closed. So if you type something there, your friends won't see it unless they happen to be members of this group. I lurked on DNA Detectives for a while, and I learned about triangulation. I learned about not contacting anyone until I had determined my relationship to him or her. I learned about uploading raw DNA to other sites such as MyHeritage, GEDmatch, FTDNA. You can do that all for free. If those don't work, you can also purchase a test and with 23andMe. I learned that Ancestry has many, many more customers that test than any of the other sites combined. So that's the first place you want to test is with Ancestry, because if you're looking for a match, the likelihood is you will have more from them. I learned the recommended way to contact potential relatives, and I learned about how fragile ethnicity estimates are, and we've already talked about that, how ethnicity estimates will vary from site to site and will change as the algorithms change. I learned about the randomness of DNA inheritance. That means that you inherit 50% of your DNA from your parents, one from each parent, so that your 100% comes from the two parents. They do the same. They've inherited 50%, but at some point along the line, you might not inherit. You might get more of your mother's father's DNA than you will your mother's DNA. I learned about a tool called DNA Painter. That's a website where you can go and get tools and learn how you can maybe match somebody else, if you have a certain centimorgan match with someone, what the possible relationships could be. That's a really valuable tool. I learned that of all of the databases, the only ones that can tell you for sure how you are related to somebody based on the centimorgans is for a parent and child. I learned that Ancestry's relationship suggestions doesn't even include aunt or uncle or a removed cousin relationship. I learned that on Ancestry, half siblings and aunts and uncles fall under close relationships, while half nieces and nephews fall under the same relationship as a first cousin. I learned to screenshot all things possible that have high matches. The reason for that is that if somebody else sees that they match with you and they weren't expecting something coming along, they might just pull their DNA off, or they might go private, or they might block you or something. So make sure you screenshot any high matches, because they may not be there the next time you go back to look at them. I realized that I had to, in order to figure out who John's father was, I had to know people who matched with his mother in order to be able to separate the mother's side from the father's side. So I paid for and tested one of John's cousins on his father's side. Marion is the daughter of Wilmer Bond's brother. If Wilmer is John's father, then Marion should match John as a first cousin. I looked through every match she had, and there is no match to John. There's more matches of Marion's. These are some people that we know that are, this Bethany right here is John's first cousin once removed. We know her quite well. She's been down here to visit us in Florida from Maine. And she doesn't match John, but she does match Marion at 357 centimorgans, which is about the right amount to be a first cousin once removed. Peter is Bethany's son. He again matches Marion, but not John. Now here's Roger. Roger is Florence's brother, or John's first cousin. He matches John. He matches other people that we know who are related to him, including Vincent. If you can see the name Vincent down there, that's our son. He matches with Roger. John matches with Roger. Imogene down there is John's half first cousin, which matches with Roger. So we know that these people matching Roger match John in the appropriate way. So we know that Roger is John's maternal cousin. So Will was not John's father. So who was John's father? He was vindicated, John was, knowing that this man that raised him was not his dad. So I went back to finding matches for John. If you notice right here, there's a search box that you can search, and using that search box, you can search for a name of a member on Ancestry that might match you, or you can search for places or a person's name. If your match has a tree, you can look to see if any person in the tree matches somebody in yours. So you can put in, for example, Lithuania, and see if anybody that matches with you has a tree with the place Lithuania in it. So I looked for some matches, and here I am evaluating matches. Here is Rick is the top one up here that's listed as a first or second cousin. We know who Rick is. He is John's cousin's son, so that's his first cousin once removed. And we know who Imogene is. That's the same one we've talked about. I don't know any of the other people, but I matched them, and they match John with Imogene and Rick. So if they match John with Imogene and Rick, that means that they are on John's mother's side. So we can discount them as being related to John's father, unless, of course, John's parents were related to each other. If you look at here, we see the first or second cousin thing, and that, as we know, it's first cousin once removed. So we know that those projected relationships from ancestry are just suggestions. They're not accurate. And here's the Imogene's got 372 centimorgans, which is accurate for a first cousin once removed. We can look and see that some people like this, Reese Jen, has a common ancestor. She has a tree, and in that tree is a common ancestor that's in our tree that John is linked to. Now here's Rick back again. I'm looking at Rick's individuals thing, how they share. And you see right there, I can add a note. So I added a note, I clicked on that, and I can add a note, and I'm going to put down how that person is related to John. And I put over here, you can see that I put down now that he is the son of Richard. And that way, when I come back and look at this again, I can look on the side where all the notes are, and that will tell me who they are, and I don't need to go look for them for anything more. And this LC down here, I don't know who that is, but she is related to Roger and Susie and some others, so she must be on John's mother's side. So I've written that in there. Now here's people that don't match Roger. Kelly is one. And if you notice, you can put stars that mean only whatever you want them to mean. And you can put notes, so I put Lithuania and some other things on here to let them know that this person is somehow related to John's father. The little stars on there are John's biological father, the unknown father. Nothing I could do. I'm gonna back up just a little bit so you can look at that while I'm talking a little bit here. I sent a note to this Kelly that is circled there, and this was before I had read the DNA detectives thing, so you're not supposed to contact people till you know how they're related. But I contacted her right immediately after we'd gotten this match. She has a tree of 196 people. Some of those people have Lithuanian background. She responded, but she didn't know anything other than that her great-grandfather came from Lithuania. She knew his name, but she didn't know anything more. She's only about 30 years old, young enough to be a couple of generations younger than John. She thought that maybe the father of John could be a nephew or a brother of her great-grandfather. The immigrant ancestor of all of these other people settled mostly in Chicago or Massachusetts. I learned from DNA Detective, in order to figure out how somebody's related to you and maybe find a potential biological parent, was that you need to build trees of those people you match, and then you come forward in time to where your lines intersect. I told John that if I had the skills to do this, if his unknown ancestry, I could do this if it was somewhere in England where I could read the language, or the US or Canada, or even Norway, because I have done some research in Norway, but I didn't know anything about Lithuanian research. I didn't know what records were available. I certainly don't know how to read Lithuanian. And I told him that we probably were at a standstill, that I couldn't do anything more unless somebody else tested that was closer than Kelly. I just couldn't figure out how to do this. And I said, you'll probably die, because he was about 75 at the time. I said, you'll probably die not ever knowing who your biological father was. But at least you knew that Wilmer was not his father. So time went by, a couple of years goes by actually. And I had, in the meantime, based on my learning from my previous DNA detective search, I had uploaded his raw DNA from Ancestry to MyHeritage where it's set for a couple of years. Now, I'm going to show you this one, and I want to give you a little caveat. Catherine Leonard is the name that I've chosen for this person, and this is an avatar that I put over here. This is not her real name, and this avatar is hiding a picture because I don't want her information out here. I don't think it's ethical to put her stuff out here without her permission. So this is Catherine Leonard as a pseudonym for the person that I found. On Thanksgiving week last year, 2019, I happened to open MyHeritage to look at the DNA, and I hadn't done that in months. Here's what I saw with the matches. This person was new to me, and I clicked on her name. There she's estimated relationship as first cousin, great niece, and she's got 899 centimorgans. And I saw that she's in her 50s. She doesn't have a tree. She doesn't have any other information than her picture, and that she's in her 50s, and that she lives in the United States. The real picture shows her in front of some buildings outside, and the buildings look like they could be a medical complex. There is a feature so you can contact her, and I did, but I didn't contact her until after I had done the following steps that we're going to learn about here. I had to do all of this research, but when I found her, from the time I knew who she was, it took me 6 hours to figure out who John's father was based on this picture and her centimorgans and the research that I did frantically during those 6 hours. Okay, then go back here. It shows that this is the first cousin great niece, but that's just an estimate, and there's lots of other things to do. Now I'm going to go to this DNA Painter. I've mentioned that already. I'm going to go click on that and to hyperlink to the internet and show you what DNA Painter looks like. DNA Painter right here shows you possible relationships to different people and how they could be related to you. You can see all the different colors. Click on them and highlight them. Go back up here and you type in the centimorgans. John and Catherine are related with 899 centimorgans. So when you see I type that in, it comes with the possible relationships. There's a 98% possibility that she is his great-grandparent. Well, because she's in her 50s, I know that's not true. Because she's in her 50s, she's not a great aunt. She could be a half aunt, but most people don't have aunts that are 20 years younger than they are. First cousin is very viable. I have first cousins that are in the 800 range. Half niece and nephew, yes, she could be a half niece. A great niece based on the age, probably not. So I'm focusing on that she could be a first cousin or a half niece. And obviously she couldn't be John's great grandchild. If you go down to DNA Painter, you see that everything's grayed out of the things that she could not be, and only the things that she could be are outlined right there. So this is an extremely valuable tool. I use it for other DNA cases as well. So that's where we go from there. So let's get back to where we were. And here we see the shared matches with John and Catherine. If you look down there, you'll see Kelly. Kelly's that same girl that I contacted several years ago. She matches Catherine and John. She doesn't match any of John's other maternal relatives. So we know that Catherine has to be on John's father's side. And showing an 899 centimorgan match, that's tremendous. That's a huge, huge bunch. So see Kelly there. I am so excited when I saw this. It was like 9 o'clock at night, and there's no way I'm going to go to bed at that time. So I needed more information on Catherine. She's in her 50s, and she's in the United States, and it's a female. I didn't know anything else. I looked to see if she had done her DNA on Ancestry, and she had not. She has no tree here. She doesn't say where she's from. I downloaded her picture and I uploaded it to Google to see if there was facial recognition that could tell me who she was, and that didn't work. I went to DNA Detectives and told them what I had found. A search angel that is on the DNA Detective Facebook page contacted me, and she has a subscription to a company called Ben Verified, and that's a place where you can look up, using public records, can look up a living person. She found 11 women in the United States who were in their 50s. She gave me that information, and I started looking online for each of them. A couple of them were in England, so I set that aside. Several were of another race, and I set them aside. One of the Catherine Leonards lived in upstate New York, and as I looked at her, I found that she had a great-grandfather from Lithuania. I was excited. Oh, you're probably wondering how I found that. That person did have a tree on Ancestry, so I found her tree, and she had a great-grandfather from Lithuania. I was so excited, I told John that I thought we had found the right family. But the more I looked at the family, I still couldn't see a connection. So I decided to set that Catherine Leonard aside, and I checked on another one. The one I checked on lives in Cumberland County, Maine, the largest county by population in Maine. I found through Google that the Catherine in Cumberland County lives in this house. I found that I found on Google that when she got, that her maiden name was Wadsworth. Her name was Catherine Leonard, according to the DNA match, but when she got, before she married, her name was Wadsworth. So I went back to Ancestry.com and I found this marriage, little blurb on marriage. Here she is. Oops, let me go back again. She married Brad Leonard in Portland, Maine in 1981. Again, I've changed these names, so there's really no Brad Leonard. And then I went to the public records on Ancestry, and I found out, guess what? She lived on Burgess Hill in 1960. I mean, whenever this was done, I don't know when this was done. She got married in 81, so it must have been before that because she was a Wadsworth, not a Leonard. Burgess Hill, remember, there's only a dozen homes on Burgess Hill. So I went to Facebook looking for Catherine Leonard. There are many. If you look here, there's a search Facebook page. That's not my Facebook page. But if you look over here, there's a search Facebook page. You can search for all kinds of things on there, including groups, but you can search for members of Facebook. And there were many, many Catherine Leonards. None of them looked like the picture of this Catherine Leonard on MyHeritage. I thought about Catherine Leonard. Well, what's the nickname for Catherine Leonard? Well, I looked up Kathy Leonard, and there was a Kathy Wadsworth Leonard. Before I even pulled her up, I knew that had to be the same one. And here she is. She is there, same face, different pose, but same face. I looked at all of her pictures, and in some of those pictures, there was an older couple that I thought were her parents, but she doesn't identify anyone in the pictures, but people do make comments. Cassie's probably one of those people that values the privacy, but not enough to make everything private. She does have pictures that I don't have to be her friend to see, but she doesn't say a word about who those people are. But a woman named Gail Brown says, "Your auntie loves that face." This is her face, and Auntie Gail loves that face. So there's a relationship. Gail is related to Kathy. How, other than being an aunt, which side of the family, I don't know, but there she is. She could be a sibling or a sister-in-law of either of Kathy's parents. So I looked more at pictures on Kathy's Facebook page. Oh, there's Gail. There's Kathy's home on her Facebook page. Remember, I'd seen the Kathy that had taken the DNA test and found her address, and this was the address on Google. Well, there she is. Same house. And Facebook also has other groups besides the DNA detectives. Obviously, they have groups for knitting and dogs and anything else you're interested in. There are groups called "You Know You're From Whatever City If." I've seen those pages all over the place. Some of my friends belong to them. There's a public Facebook page called "You Know You're From Rumford, Maine If." Well, I searched for Kathy's name when I searched for it, I see that she had made some comments on several Facebook groups that were public, and this was one of them. And she made this comment based on this picture. A man named Bob Pritchett had posted this picture on the Rumford page. He mentions that these are his people, his parents, and they were on a trip to New York City at the time of the picture was taken in the 60s, back in the 60s. Kathy says, what an awesome picture of Grammy and Grampy. Thank you for sharing. Well, these are his parents. This is Bob Pritchett's parents. And he mentions their names in his comment. I don't have a slide of that, but he mentions who they are. I know that Kathy has an aunt, Gail, and an uncle, Bob Pritchett. Were Gail and Bob related, or were they from different sides of the family? So I checked on Bob's profile, and I don't have a slide for that, but he mentions his wonderful sister, Gail. So I now know that Pritchett, Bob Pritchett, is the last name of one of Cindy's grandfathers, and Wadsworth would be the name of another of her grandfathers. Either one at this time could be John's father. I checked comments that, I went to Bob's Facebook page, there's Kathy, went to Bob's Facebook page, and there's Kathy making a comment on that. I loved our family outings to the Oxford Plains Speedway to watch Willie race against Al Hammond. I remember cheering you on, Uncle Bob. And Bob has mentioned in this picture when he posted it that Willie is his brother. So now I know that there's a Bob, a Willie, and a Gail that are all siblings, and they're all aunts, or an aunt and two uncles of Kathy. And I looked for a couple with the name Wadsworth and the name Leonard, and that got married. So I went back to Ancestry, and there's a Barbara Pritchett who marries a Gerald Wadsworth in Maine. Wow, that sounds like it could be them. Of course, there's other Pritchetts that might have married Wadsworth, but I'm not quite sure, but I continue on. I started looking at all kinds of things, and I don't have enough time to post all of the pictures of what I looked at, but here's what I did. I did a quick tree for Gerald, and I found both sides of his family that he is colonial ancestry. So it looks like Gerald is not John's half-brother, but because there's nothing Eastern European in his background. I did a quick tree for Barbara Pritchett, and it wasn't long before I found that her parents were William and Rose Pritchett. Those are the people that were in that picture that Bob had posted. There wasn't much that I could find right at the moment for their tree, so I had to start building one. Gerald had trees that were built already on Ancestry that some of his relatives had put up there. Gerald had grown up over 200 miles from Rumford, but Barbara was from Rumford. I think it's amazing. Bob mentions in one of his posts that he had learned to dance by watching American Bandstand, and he was actually forced to dance because he had three sisters that wanted to dance, and he was the only brother that they would dance that was at home. So that tells me that Bill had three sisters, and he has one brother that was no longer living at home. I looked on Ancestry and on classmates.com for yearbooks, and I found Barbara in the yearbook in 1958. She's in the same class as John's older sister, June. They were in pictures together in several service clubs, and they had to have known one another. So I'm assuming that Barbara is the aunt, or Barbara is the parent of Kathy, who would be John's half sibling. I don't think it was Gerald, because Gerald lived too far away, and the fact that Barbara was going to school with John's older sister is pretty compelling that they were at least neighbors. So I go back to the 1940 census. Remember, this is the second page of the 1940 census. There's Glenda, who is Florence's sister-in-law, living with them. We're still on Burgess Hill, and right here is William Pritchett, Rose Pritchett with Willie. Remember, that's Bob's brother and Kathy's uncle, and Barbara. Barbara is Kathy's mother. 5 doors away from that other house that I showed you early. None of the names of these families, the Pritchett family, looked Lithuanian, and everybody in that family, except the mother, was born in Maine, but they had Lithuanian neighbors. So who was William Pritchett? If Kathy is John's half-niece, then her mother Barbara or her father Gerald is his half-sibling. Gerald didn't live in the area, Barbara did. Gerald shows no Eastern European. I didn't see anything immediately for Eastern European from Barbara either. Barbara and her parents and older brother were just 5 doors down from John's mother and his purported father on Burgess Hill. So could Barbara's father, William, also be John's father? But the names aren't Eastern European. The censuses said they were all born in Maine, but the 1940 census does not say where the parents of the enumerated were born. If you know all the other censuses prior to that, from 1880 on forward to 1930, say where the parents of the enumerated were born, but not 1940. So on with the hunt. So I'm looking for something about William and Rose. They got married in Rumford in 1934. This is the marriage record that I found on Ancestry. This in Maine has vital record cards, and this is one side of the card. This is the other side of the card. Look at the names of the parents. William Pritchett's father was Adam Pritchett, aged 47, living in Europe, and his mother was Tekla Sobut, living in Europe. Tekla Sobut does not sound like an American name to me. And I knew, and when I saw this record, that this was something I needed to pursue. I was pretty 90% sure at this point that William Sr. was John's father. And I started just flying through things. I went through the 1930 census, and I found the family there. It shows that Adam and Tekla with their family, they were born in Lithuania. Oh, one thing I didn't show you here is that they were born, I think it says in here that they were born in Europe, yeah. This one says that they were born in Lithuania. The 1920 census, said they were born in Russia. If you know a little bit about history, you'll know that in 1920, Lithuania was occupied by Russia, so they were Russian at that time. So then I went to Tekla's marriage record, and I found that when she got married, she was married to an Adam Petrakis, and her name was Tekla Subatis, and they were from Russia. Again, that was the occupier of Lithuania. They were married in 1911, February of 1911. The reverse side gives the names of their parents. I didn't copy that. Gives a reverse side of their parents and that they're living in Russia. It lists what they're due for a living and so on and so forth. So I was so excited about this time that I had about 10 tabs open, and I was going back and forth. I looked at death records on Ancestry. I looked at vital records on Family Search that showed the children born to Adam and Tekla in Maine. I looked at pictures of their gravestones on Find a Grave. I went back to Facebook. This is where Bob makes mention of his 3 sisters. I looked at the profile pictures of his sister Gail. Kathy mentions how fond she is of her Aunt Gail. I looked at city directories on Ancestry. I found obituaries on newspapers.com. I Googled everybody's names and addresses. I looked at yearbooks on Ancestry and classmates.com, and I found every one of William and Rose's children that lived on Burgess Hill. They were in the yearbooks. I looked at Oxford County, Maine official records. Those of you who are searching in Maine, if you don't already know this, every single public record that includes those items that are listed on the bullets are listed online. You can go to any one of the county's websites in Maine and you will find records going back to the time of the state was founded in 1820. This is probably the best county, the best state that has all the records involved in that. So I found all of the records. I found that house that we showed you that was bought in 1920 by John's grandfather, maternal grandfather. I saw all the transfers of that. I saw the mortgages. I saw divorces, current divorces of people that I actually know up there in Maine. It had the values of the property taxes. It had a legal description of the property, and it had probate records. So I looked for the probate record of William Pritchett, who was John's father, we believe. And there it says that in his first item, he believes he gives most everything to his son, William Pritchett Jr., and then he lists his other children, Robert Pritchett, Barbara Wadsworth, so that there's Kathy's mother, Gail Brown, who is the aunt, and Nancy Thomas. Nancy is one that I didn't know about before, so here we have the complete family. The three sisters that taught Bob how to dance, the other brother that was a race car driver that was older than Bob. So there you go. So now I knew how they fill it in. So here's what we found, doing all the research that I just mentioned, that Adam Petrakis was born in 1885 and he died in 1958. He married Tekla, and I can't pronounce this, Subatate in 1885, and she died in 1885. Excuse me. She was born in 1885 and died in 1967. They were married in 1911, as we have seen, but sometime between 1911, when they got married, in 1920, when the census was taken, they changed the name to Pritchett. They had 3 sons and 1 daughter between 1911 and 1927, and none of his other sons could be John's father. I checked it out with some of the other people on this DNA detectives. I said, could there be a possibility that one of Adam's other sons could be John's father, not William? And they said no. The centimorgan match to Kathy, if one of those men were John's father, would be much lower. So there we go. This is John's biological father's family. William Pritchett, born 1911, died 1996, married in 1934 to Ruth Baker. She was born in 1914 and died in 1978. Their children were William, Barbara, Gail, Nancy, and Robert. And you can see that William, the older brother, the race car driver, died in 3 years ago. It was 2 years when I found this. So what did I do? I sent a message to Kathy saying, I have found that you match my husband and we're trying to figure out how you're related. Now, I already knew how we were related, but I'm not going to spring this on her and tell her, how are we related? I need your help. This I sent to her a day or two after Thanksgiving, and I didn't hear anything, nothing. The holidays were going on, and I thought, well, let's wait until after the holidays. Maybe this is a surprise. She's got company. I don't know. She hadn't responded. So in January, I told John that Kathy had not responded, and he looked at the pictures on Facebook of these siblings of his. Barbara, well, I still don't know if Barbara's on Facebook, but I saw Gail, I saw Nancy, and I saw Bob. And he said, send the letter to Gail. She's the kindest. So we wrote a letter to Gail. And in that letter, I sent pictures of our family. I said, in case you think we're scammers, and I gave a little story of us and how long we've been married and where we lived and so on and so forth. And I said, I think you are related to John, and I'm trying to figure out how. I told him that Kathy had taken the test. So this was January. I didn't get any response. By March, I thought, well, I'm going to try sending another letter to Bob, a similar letter to Bob or to Nancy, or maybe even to Barbara. And I thought, well, I'll do that next week. Well, I get an email from Gail. She winters in Alabama, and she had not seen this letter until just recently because it had been forwarded to her from Maine. She'd gotten the letter just about the time when the COVID-19 stuff was going on. And she immediately knew that I was saying that John and she were half brother and sister, and that her father had impregnated the neighbor's wife. She wasn't real happy about knowing that, but she said, I believe everybody has a right to know their origin, so let me know what I can do to help. So I asked her if she would take the DNA test, and she did. And I asked her if she would, I asked her for contact information. She gave me her phone number. She said she and her husband usually stayed in the South until April, but because of COVID, they were going to go home. So send a kit to her home. So I sent a kit to her home, and it was a long, convoluted story, but ended up that she and Bob both took the tests. I paid for them. That's if you're going to do a test and ask somebody to take one, you offer to pay for it. I offered them both the opportunity to manage their own tests, but they didn't want to know about it. She said one of her sentences in an email to me was, I do not want to know if my father impregnated any more women. But they have been so friendly. She sent me this picture on the left where John's home is, as it looks like 2 weeks ago. This home is the one that picture I took in 1986. And it's got the fall leaves. The other picture is the house where she grew up, where her parents lived. And ironically, Barbara and her husband have bought the childhood home, and they live in there now. Gail and Bob have been so welcoming. John talks to Gail several times since this discovery was made. I think it's about once a month, every 6 or 8 weeks. It's funny because Kathy, who took the test, who opened all of this up, never did respond. Gail talked to Kathy about this, and she said that she went to her mother and told her about the letter, and her mother forbid her to respond to me. Her mother was the oldest daughter in this family, and her father revered her and called her his little princess, and she does not want to know that her father cheated with the neighbor's wife. Kathy has never responded to us, and Barbara has never responded to us. Nancy and John have had a snail mail conversation, a couple of letters back and forth. She's not as open about this, but she's eager to meet us. We had plans to meet the whole family in August, but again, the coronavirus decided that we weren't going to do that. But ironically, Bob lives in Florida during the wintertime, and on his way back, we social distanced, and we met Bob at a roadside park in Ocala in April, and this is the two of them. And Bob's wife was there, and she said that John looks just like Bob's father. Now you can see that Bob there doesn't look like anything like John, and I'm thinking, ooh, we've got this wrong. But this picture was taken before he took the DNA test, and they are half brother and sister. Bob and John and Bob's wife all say, and Gail says from looking at John's pictures, that he looks a lot like their father. It's interesting that Gail's son lives in Montana, and he had to go to Salt Lake for a temporary situation for about 6 weeks. He's currently there now. My son lives in Salt Lake, and the two of them have met each other, and they have they've conversed several times by text and phone, and they've met each other. They've gone out to eat together, and the Gail sons looked at John's pictures and said, oh my gosh, she's the spitting image of my grandpa. So John feels vindicated. So of course, this doesn't stop there. I had to find out more. Doesn't any genealogist want to have more questions and more answers? So I joined another Facebook page called the Lithuanian Genealogy Facebook page. I told the story. Here's my query. On April, I said, this is my first post, and I told the whole story. And then I told him who these people were. And if you notice there, I got 58 comments. There was this wonderful lady who lives in Sweden, but she is from Lithuania. She speaks Russian, Lithuanian, Swedish, English, and probably something else. She sent me, I don't know, 20 or 30 documents showing who John's grandparents, where they were born in Lithuania, Adam and Tekla. These are their birth certificates. If I could blow them up, I would, but I can't hardly even read them. They're written in Russian, because at that time, Russian was the occupier. And so I took everything that this woman gave me, and with some more research in the United States, and I've come up with family group sheets for the Lithuanians. And here we have Adam Petrakis was right here. He was Adomas, I guess, is how you pronounce it, in Lithuania. These are his parents and his siblings. Philomena came to Maine as well, and she became Phyllis. Back up a little bit. Geronimus, he came to Maine as well, and he became Jerry. The others, Stanislava, she died as a young adult, and I don't know what happened to Josephus, and I think that's Joseph. I don't know what happened to him. But I'm still, of course, working on this. Another DNA find was John has a second cousin who lives in Uruguay, and her grandfather immigrated to Argentina about the same time that these Petrakis and Sobuts did in 1911 or so, 1908, I think. Her grandfather came to Argentina, and she lives in Uruguay. And her grandfather's name was Sobut, which is Tekla's last name in English. So I'm thinking that Tekla and her grandfather, this Uruguayan woman's grandfather, are brother and sister, but I don't know that yet. I need more information. Are there any questions?
Super. Thank you so much. As of right now, we don't have any questions, but let's give everybody a few minutes. It seems that they are overwhelmed. Any questions? In the control panel, just open it with the, there we go. Open it with the orange arrow and then click on the questions. Okay, Dennis says, what do you want to do next?
What do I want to do next? I want to eventually get to Lithuania and see where these people lived. They lived in a little village. This little town is in a province called, and I can't pronounce any of this, Telsai, and it seems like it's a farming community. I learned the customs of this, how women are named in Lithuania. The women have a different last name. Their maiden name is spelled differently, or their last name is spelled differently according to their marital status. If you looked at my Tekla's name, well, we'll look at this down here, Stanislava. Her name is Petrakite. That symbolizes that she is a single female. Her brother is a Petrakis. Her sister is Petrakite, or however we pronounce it. Now, when she gets married and she takes her husband's name, if she got married, let's say that she married Sobut, it wouldn't be Sobut, it would be Sobutine or something like that. It will change, the suffix will change. So I want to do that. I want to tie this lady from Uruguay to John, and I want to do, just a whole lot more. There's just so much more to be done. It's just like any genealogy puzzle. You get one question answered and you get 16 more opened up. But I know who John's father is. And of course, the next thing John wants to do, he doesn't really care about the genealogy. What he really wants to do is finally get up to Maine and meet his siblings and their children. And except for Barbara, they are all excited about doing that. And they're all wanting to meet us. And in fact, this boy that lives in Montana said that all the cousins are talking about this and they're so excited to meet us all. So that's where we want to go.
Super. Are there any other questions? Rosie says, great job, fascinating string of events. Have you gone to the town on Google Earth?
Yes, I have. I've gone to the town and it's primarily just a little tiny village and it's just mostly farmland. There's not much there. I did learn about Lithuania, that the first language for most people there is Lithuanian, but most people, 99% of the people speak English. English is an official language of Lithuania, especially in the larger cities of Vilnius and all of these other larger cities, but the smaller villages still are not as well versed in English, I guess you'd say. The churches there are the places, the repositories for the vital records, baptisms, but usually the baptisms, as opposed to English baptisms, they show the birth date as well. They show the names of the sponsors. They show if a child dies, the parents are listed. There's a lot more information on those records than I see in, say, English records.
Okay. Well, there aren't any other questions. So I will turn the, Dennis comes back and says, this is fascinating. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
There's one thing here. Let me see what this is. Do you have any John's matches still unknown?
Yes, he has, and I think I put down in the handout, but I can't remember. He's got like, I can't remember how many matches he's got, 70 some odd thousand matches, and those only 600, and some of them are fourth cousin or more closer related. So all these other 17,000, I haven't really looked at most of those because the matches are so low that it's very difficult to find out. He has all of those that I showed you on the slideshow that have the stars on them, that I'm not sure how they're related. This Kelly, for example, she's probably a first cousin 3 times removed. And I looked at her tree and she's got some Sobuts on there too. So I'm assuming that her great grandfather and Tekla might be brother and sister or cousins or something to that effect. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these Lithuanians went to Chicago, and some of John's more distant Lithuanian connections or matches, their ancestry is all in Chicago. And I learned from talking to Bob that one of his uncles is William's brother, never married, and he lived in Maine for a good while, but then he went to Chicago for a while, and then finally after that he went to Oregon where he finished out his life. But he never understood why he went to Chicago. And I said, well, I'm seeing some distant relatives probably lived in Chicago. And he said, oh, okay, that's probably why he went there then. Because he went as an older man in his 60s. He went there for, I don't know, several years. He had a successful business in Maine. And when he sold that business, he retired fairly young, maybe 60 or so. And he went to Chicago for the few years and then went on to Oregon. So some of these people in Chicago, I'd like to piece that together to figure out how we're related. But the estimated relationship that Ancestry gives to these matches of John who have ancestry in Chicago is like fifth cousins or something. So it's very difficult for me to figure out how that is. But they don't, on their trees, the few sketchy trees that they have, nobody has a similar name. There is a woman in New Jersey who is a Petrarchus, and she and John share like 12 centimorgans or something like that. So probably their common ancestor is not in the United States, never came to the United States. Their most recent common ancestor probably remained in Lithuania, which would be somebody born probably maybe late 1700s, early 1800s. I definitely wanted to move this pedigree chart back, but I don't know how to do that with the language barrier. Those records that were shared with me on Facebook, I have to take the woman's word for it that it says what she's translated because I cannot read it. Even, looking at Norwegian, for example, I can see a name. I can't see anything else, but I can't even see the name in here because they're written in the Russian alphabet. So I don't know what that means. And plus they're handwritten. So, it's not like they're typed. So is it a P that I'm looking at or is it an R or what? I don't know. But she can read them and she translated them for me.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
All right, Bill, I'm going to be turning my screen back over to me. There you go.
Okay, thank you, Ann, for turning it over. Leslie, thank you very much. Excellent, excellent presentation. And lots of tips there along the way to help out a lot of us to kind of put in place some of the things that we've been missing. Really, really appreciate the presentation. Just a reminder, our next meeting will be a virtual meeting on Wednesday, November 18th at 5:30 p.m. That's back to our normal third Wednesday of the month. The topic is going to be top search tips and tricks for ancestry and family search and more. And I'll be doing that presentation. That's a little different than the one that was originally put out in our communications. The original one I had planned really lends itself more to an in-person presentation than a virtual one. So I've changed to this particular one, and I think it's something you'll enjoy and something that'll help you along the way. And again, a reminder, our December meeting is going to be December 2nd. And it's going to be a virtual holiday party. So with that, thank you for attending this evening, and please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you in November. Thank you, Ann.